Good morning, Market Chameleon community, and my favorite chameleon, soon to appear, Dimitri Pargamonic. How you doing, Dima?
Good morning, Will. How are you?
Great. The disclaimer's up. You want to give it a roll?
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, keep in mind, Will and I, Market Chameleon, we're not registered investment advisors. We're not broker dealers. We're not telling you what to do. We're just sharing ideas. If you need professional advice, call your broker. That's what they're there for, to help answer questions and provide you with guidance. There's the disclaimer.
All right.
And let's get started. I'm going to share my screen.
You're going to hear sound real quick, D. I'm starting the webinar on Zoom. So we'll be able to come in and ask questions live if they want to come on over on that link.
Okay. 1 second. Well, I just
No worries, well, he's going through the process. Everyone, I put a link on the YouTube chat. You can click that over, come to the Zoom. We're having a Q&A day, so any questions you may have about things Dimitri has talked about in the past or any questions around Market Chameleon, please come on over and ask us. Just raise your hand when you're in the Zoom, and I will allow you to come over and talk. It's as simple as that. All right, Dima, what are you seeing this morning, buddy?
Awesome. Thanks, Will. So I think what we'll do is, while we're waiting for any questions to queue up, we'll start with the pre-market report. I have some other reports I was about to get to yesterday. I didn't get a chance. So if you know the questions are coming in late, I'm just going to go towards those. Some of the options reports we haven't looked at in a while. So let's just get started, and you let me know, Will, if you see questions coming in. So this is the pre-market report. These are stocks trading in a pre-market hours. We have the most active stocks, biggest percentage gainers, biggest percentage decliners. I'm coming down here and I see 152 stocks made our percentage gainers list, 38 on the percentage decliners list. So from that perspective, it looks like a more bullish bias right now at the open. Let's take a look at the S&P 500 stocks to see if we have a similar situation. I'm coming up here to the filters, and any of these filters will basically filter out the report at the bottom. I'm going to choose the SPY ETF. By doing that, this report will filter out by S&P 500 or components, SPY holdings. And I see 22 stocks made our percentage gainers list, 4 on a percentage decliners list. So even the S&P SPY looks like we're setting up for a stronger or bullish bias at the open. If there are no questions coming in, Will, I'll just start on some of these option reports.
Yep, none have popped up, D. Go ahead.
Okay. So under here, the main menu options, we got a bunch of tools here. And let's do this volatility compare. I'm going to come here, and a lot of times what options traders look at is the implied volatility, right? Is the implied volatility going up? Is the implied volatility going down? Is it high relative to historical levels? Is it low? And besides that, you may want to compare a group of similar stocks relative to each other. So how do we do all that I just mentioned? And we're going to try to do that visually. Okay. So here, what I have is this here is the comparison group on this side. And this is a baseline, which we're going to use to benchmark. And right now I have it set to the Dow Jones components. So these are the Dow Jones. If you click on that, you could select different groups. Some of them you could select by ETF, or if you have your watch list, you could select the watch list. So if you want to create your own group of stocks that you track, you could do that as well. Let's stick to the Dow Jones for now. And this baseline here is, I want to compare the implied volatilities of the Dow Jones, but I want to see, at least with this baseline, is how did they change on the day from the previous day? So did the implied volatility in the stocks go up today? And this is yesterday's because we're closed, so we're looking at yesterday's. Did the implied volatility go up in the stocks? Did they go down? And by how much? And how did they compare to the rest of the group? All right, so that's what we're looking at. So look at this graph down here. You see here, this is the 30-day implied volatility. So, starting from 0 going up. And below, that's the 30-day IV from the previous day. So here we have this line. Okay, you see this line going through. That's the benchmark line. So right here, let's hover over Nike, right? So here's Nike. We see that, it's a little bit below yesterday. So it's in the red. So we could see that this implied volatility is 37.5, day before 38.2. So it's down a little bit on the day, right? But what visually we could see is the following. Nike is down, right? And I'm seeing that most of them were up, right? Because a lot of them were on the green. So if we're just comparing the Dow Jones, most of them were higher yesterday. A couple were lower. So the ones in the red stick out that were lower. The ones in the green stick out because they were higher on the day. The other thing this is telling me is how far away did it move from the previous day. So here we see WBA, it was up, but we could see it was up a decent, away from its benchmark by more than it looks to me like the other stocks. So the implied volatility went from 31.3 to 33. Now, if it went way up, then I would see it, go all somewhere up here. It would seem to go much higher. Another thing that this graph visually is telling us is not only which stocks went up, implied volatility, which ones went down, but on a relative basis where the implied volatilities are the highest and the lowest. So I could see that in KD, the implied volatility is 58, right? Which is way higher than where these are clustering around. So most of the Dow Jones, it looks to me, are clustering, I guess, between 20 and 30. Then we got Nike out here. And then the next highest one is KD, which is way up here, right? And all this, we could just see in one chart, right? So a lot of stuff going on here, but once you get used to reading the chart, visually, you get a really quick picture of what's going up, what's going down, by how much, and how the implied volatilities are moving relative to each other. All right, so let's take another look. I'm going to change the benchmark now. So let's say instead of just looking at the change, we want to take a look at how do the current implied volatilities compare to the realized volatility. So let's say based on how the stocks have been moving in the last 20 days, how does the current implied volatility, forward-looking volatility compare to the most recent 20-day realized volatility? And here, now we get a different picture. So KD, of course, still the highest implied vol, but you could see that on a relative basis, compared to how the realized volatility moved in the last 20 days, that implied volatility is below the historical vol. So you could see, and it could have been earnings, so I'd have to go look, but you could see that in the last 20 days, KD moved an 85% realized volatility, implied volatility right now 58. So here, even though this is KD's out of the group has the highest implied volatility relative to its 20-day realized volatility, looks to me like it's the furthest away. All right, and then we could see all the rest of them. Procter & Gamble looks to me, it has like the lowest implied volatility, but it's slightly above its 20-day realized. And then you can see where all this is clustered. Let's take a look at another benchmark. So I'm going to switch it. And let's look at this group from a different perspective. We could do it from the 52-week historical vol, right? So let's just stretch it out and say maybe not the most recent, but it's long-term volatility. realized volatility, just take that 52 week. And now we get a picture where the majority of them look to me, right, in the green. They're mostly in a green. They're above their 52 week or longer term realized vol. A couple of them, KD, Intel, looks like maybe CVX, slightly below their historical vols. Let's try another one. What about if we compared the implied volatility versus itself? So there we're comparing implied vol coming from the options to the stock volatility. Let's take a look at the versus the historical implied vol. So how does today's implied volatility compare to the 52-week average implied vol? Let's do that. So you could see here now we get more of a mixed picture. All right, but it looks to me like Nike's kind of standing out there. Historically, the IV traded around 25.2. Now it's 37.5. BA, Verizon looks like they're getting up there. KD below, Intel below. What about if we wanted to just compare it to the 52-week low IV or 52-week high IV? So let's take a look here. So this is taking each of these stocks and looking at the lowest 52-week lowest implied volatility, and then we're comparing it to today's. So let's reload that. And we could see here, how most of them, Nike's well above its low. KD is like right there, and you can see how far away they are from the low. What about if we want to see how far away from the high? 52-week high vol. So we could see here, that they're pretty far away right now from the maybe Nike's like getting the closest to the 52-week high, but you could kind of tell, that right now they're pretty, they're still pretty far away from the 52-week highs in general. So this is, again, taking implied volatility, taking a group of stocks and trying to visually compare them versus each other and what's going on in that IV. So let me come back to
Trevor was asking, when you see like example, let's say the Nike,
Yep.
What is that when you're looking at that? What is that telling you? What would be your next step in looking at that volatility? For looking for maybe something that is, would you be looking for volatility to come in if it's near its 52-week high? Would you see if there's news potentially coming out? What would be your next step in your research? He was asking.
One thing is I'd probably want to figure out why is Nike's implied volatility high. There could be a reason for it, but that's what this is pointing it out to me, right? Something is getting pointed out like, well, what's going on with Nike? Why is it so much different than the other ones? Could be earnings, it could be something going on. So you'd have to figure out like what I'd have to start going through it. I'm not going to, start kind of reading while we're on here and trying to research it. I don't know. It's just that chart pointed something out to me. And that's what I'd want to know. Well, why is Nike implied vols higher? Does that present some type of trading opportunity? Where is there something going on? Or is there a lawsuit going on? Or is there earnings coming up? Is there a conference coming up in there? What are the, maybe similar stocks to Nike? These are Dow Jones stocks, right? So the Dow Jones stocks are still in different areas of the economy, right? And so Nike is footwear, apparel. That doesn't mean that, it's really correlated to a lot of these, but I just started out with a particular group, right? I'm not saying I'd necessarily do anything right now, but it does point something out, right? That's what the first step is to point out something that, well, why is Nike? That would be my next question. My next question is not, should I go automatically buy or sell an option? That's not my first impulse or instinct. My first impulse and instinct is, well, why does it look that way? Like why Why is it so far away? What are the reasonings? How are the option markets looking? Do I think volatility will come in? Do I think it has a potential to go up? So those are the things that I start to look at. Again, this is just pointing out, this is just kind of visually pointing out something that's different. And we could look at it within the same industry, right? So Dow Jones, obviously, a lot of these are in different industries, but let's take a look at maybe, let's look at the financial. So these are more in a similar, right? They're financial, even though, some of them might be banks. I do see differences. Some of them are exchanges in here. Some of them are banks. This is the XLF ETF. So just visually, I'm just kind of seeing like some of the exchanges look like they're above. Some of the banks look like they're a mixed bag, but it kind of just shows me like, well, why is this one really high? Maybe take a look at it. What's going on there in lows? Maybe, maybe there's something going on there. IVZ. Then we got a couple of them that are pretty, getting further away. And, this, think of it, how do I compare a group or a trend or what's going on within an industry? This is one way to do it with implied volatilities, right? That's what we're kind of trying to do, is to compare it to the 52-week average. So even here, if we're comparing it to the longer term, it looks to me like the ones with the lower implied vols are above their realized volatility historical, and the ones where the implied vols are going up, I don't know why, they're a little bit below. And that's just visually what I'm noticing right now, but I'd have to dig deeper into it, but I do have the data now in front of me. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, that's helpful, D. There's nowhere in this where you can kind of compare your watch list, the vols in your watch list against each other, is there?
Yeah, you can. So like down here,
wow, look at
I have
this.
a watch list, right? So let's say, let me just pick, here's the FANG, right? So I'm going to pick my FANG watch list.
So this is your personal watch list you have?
This is mine, right? So this is mine that I do tests on, so this is my test environment. But here, I created this one. So I put in, Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Netflix. And you could see here that if we compare those to their implied volatilities to the 52-week historical realized, they're all above. I could see Facebook right now, it has the highest implied volatility out of the group, close to Netflix. The lowest is Google. So Google is like in the low 20s. Facebook is in the 32 right now. Apple right in the middle. Well, Apple's at 30. So I could even visually see which one has a higher implied volatility, which one has a lower implied vol. And sometimes it's important because if you think that the market's going to move at one beta, right, they're all just going to move up and down 1%, that then you kind of see where the lower one is, where the higher one is. Let's take a look how they changed yesterday. So this is the implied vol change in them yesterday. So they were all up, right? So now I'm comparing this baseline. That's yesterday's IV versus today. So they're all above their previous day's baseline, right? Let's take a look at from 52-week high. So they're still pretty far away from their 52-week high. None of them are that close. Let's see from 52-week low. And they're far away from there, so probably somewhere in between. But yeah, you could create your own watch list. You could create your own group that you want to track the implied vols and load them up in here.
I found that very helpful. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, and down here you get the data table. right? So if I wanted to remove it from the group, like let's say there was an outlier and I'm like, you know what? Take out Facebook. Facebook stuff. There's stuff going on in Facebook. Maybe they have to go to Congress. Something is going on there. I'm just going to take it out. I don't care about that one. Then you just like remove it. So it removes Facebook, and now you have these four to compare versus each other. Okay, so that's how this tool works real quick. I'm going to see if everybody's okay with this tool. I'm going to try to go to the next one.
I don't know if you have time, Dave. We did have a question about
Okay.
The unusual option volume report.
Okay.
And how you would potentially use it to find an idea.
Okay. All right. So right here we're on the unusual option volume. And what is the question? Is it a specific question or just
it wasn't a specific. It was how you would use it to find a possible idea to dig deeper into.
Right. So I mean, it's a very general question, and probably we do a lot of webinars with it. Something I can't tell you in 10 minutes that do this. I think if you're looking for a 5-minute or 10-minute answer, then I don't have one. It just doesn't work that way. But if you have a specific question, that would be easier to answer than just a general question. Well, how do you look at it? Because there's 134 stocks in here, that made it for different reasons. And it's a starting point, right? Like right now I'm looking at unusual option volume, and what is it pointing out to me? Well, here's list of stocks, the symbol, I'm seeing the volume in the options. I'm seeing the relative volume. So this AVCT traded 21,000 contracts yesterday, which is 136 times its average daily volume. I see that most of it are in the calls, 98% versus the puts. On average, it trades 157 contracts. So what's going on there? It was up 82%. Maybe it was news and it's a low price stock. I see what the implied vol did and how high it is. And I could start filtering this as well, right? So I could use different filters depending on what I'm looking for. The other thing over here, it just tells me if I'm looking in the last 12 days, we kind of take a look and say, well, how often did this stock appear on the unusual option volume? So if you click on it, you kind of get a view of the last 12 days. So you could see here recently, it's been making the unusual volume report. So whatever Sienna, and we see its earnings, right? So we see that this is right here. December 19th, before the market opened, reported earnings. So this was earnings based, but that explains the unusual option volume in Sienna, right? That was just volume coming in anticipation of an earnings move. Reported earnings, they're up 15%. Then that day, implied vol was lower. So that's it, that unusual option volume, that spike in volume can be explained, right? And we know why that happened. Here's one. Let's pick one. Maybe here. I'm trying to pick not such a low price stock. RDWR, that here there's going to be a company event, or there was one December 9th. We see a little bit of volume pickup. Looks like maybe the stock, on that, ahead of that event rally, right? So there's a kind of like a long buildup. And again, it's a starting point, right? You would want to then go in there and do your research. What's going on in the stock? What are the potential catalysts? What other events are happening? But Felix, we've had a lot of webinars.
Yeah, I just put out one of Felix's old one. For everyone who knows our MarketChameleon.com channel, you can search for videos by, I just searched for unusual option volume. There were like 5 or 7 videos that popped up. So, and a few of them were with Felix. So I put an oldie but goodie in there. Trevor did have a question about this. How do you determine whether it's buying or selling of the options when it's showing up in the unusual option volume report. I know they're buyers and sellers, but
Right.
in my mind, it would be what the vol's doing. If the vol was going up, I would be under the impression that there were more buyers of the options than sellers.
Exactly. That's good. That's how we benchmark. So when you benchmark a stock, how do you know stock is going up or down? Well, if we look at the stocks the previous day and we compare it to the most recent, we could see that the stock's going up. Or we could compare it to the moving average, and is the stock above or below the moving average? Well, in options, they don't work the same way because options have different strikes. They have, they move around with the stock and so forth. So to determine, are people buying or selling premiums, right? Are they buying options or selling options? We benchmark them to the implied volatility. And that's what we see here. Well, which one was I looking at? BHG. Implied volatility is 138. If we compared it to the previous day, we see it's down 4.4%. So in general, it's probably staying where it's at, maybe a little bit lower. But we also see that implied vols are in the 97th percentile rank already. So even though they dipped a little bit, they're elevated by historical standards. What this is saying is if we looked at the 30-day IV, implied volatility, 97% of the last 252 days, 97% of those days, the implied volatility was lower than 138. Okay, so those are the two things that are telling us what's going on in those option premiums. And we could see where, that there are way more calls than puts being traded in BHG. But again, we use the implied vols to kind of indicate to us, are people buying or selling option premiums?
Excellent. Well, we're almost near the end of the show. We did have one question from Alex. He was asking about some of the new features you've been talking about in the past. And I was under the assumption the one you've been showing most is the new idea dashboard. But he was asking when the new features are going to start being put out to the community. And he also was asking about calendar. Right. He was also asking about calendar spreads. I don't know if that's something you've mentioned in the past.
Right. So these are the internal alerts that we're working on that Alex is mentioning. And right now it's all in test mode. I'm hoping in January, February, we start releasing the initial version of it. But yes, Alex is right. What we're doing is trying to do a central, because right now, if you guys want to go and look at something particular, like unusual option volume, high implied volatility, low implied volatility, certain trade setups, you can do that by going to the different reports and screeners like I showed you. And this one will start, the centralized idea will start pushing things out from our database when we're analyzing, saying, well, this one looks high, looks low, this deserves some attention. And some of them are going to be strategy-based ideas. So here, like SPC brought out a calendar put spread. So you click on it, and then it'll show you, here's a calendar put spread. If I click on it, it'll populate it in the options chain, right? And what it's doing is telling us, well, this one looks like a good potential opportunity, and it'll explain it here why, because it's below historically where it was historically priced. So it's at a discount. There's a 148% profit potential. Stock is in a downtrend. So when and picked downside puts, the 14 puts. So this will benefit if the stock continues on that trend. And it benefits if implied vols start reverting to their historical mean. So these are things that we are working on, but it's still internal. Anytime you start something new, just like, especially like this involved. It's clunky in the beginning. It's not as smooth. There are errors, there are bugs that you have to work out. And this is really looking at a lot of data, and I'm doing a lot of crunching to push out ideas. So I'm hoping maybe the initial version, maybe at the end of January, is my goal.
Awesome job, my friend. That brings us to the end of another wonderful trading week. Thanks so much, buddy.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Everyone stay safe out there. Have a good weekend. Have a great trading day, and hope to see you guys on Monday.
Yep. And one last thing, I did put a link into the YouTube chat. Dee's having a webinar on Tuesday, 2 p.m. This is the 14th of December, and that's going to be, I think, on options chain analysis, right, Dee?
Yep.
Great stuff. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. Dima